Hello, everybody, and thank you very much for joining us today. My name is Brian Motherway, and I'm joining you here from the IEA. And along with the Centre for Energy, Environment and Water of India, we're very pleased to be hosting this event jointly today in the context of the Global Commission of the People on People-Centered Clean Energy Transitions, and also, of course, taking place as part of All for Climate in Italy today, the pre-COP meeting that's taking place in Milan. Our theme today is people-centered clean energy transitions, a focus on gender equity and social inclusion. And I'm delighted that we're joined by a stellar range of speakers and discussants who are going to give their perspectives from many parts of the world to illuminate what I think is one of the most important questions facing society today. So I'm delighted that so many great eminent speakers have joined us. And of course, let me start with really a very, very special guest indeed, who is acting as the chair of the People-Centered Clean Energy Transitions Global Commission, working with governments around the world as a real global leader in terms of thinking about how to accelerate clean energy transitions, but doing so in an inclusive, equitable, and progressive way that creates many decent jobs and protects those people who may be vulnerable. And so Minister Dan Jorgensen, who's the Minister for Climate, Energy and Utilities, really has shown great global leadership. And Minister, we're delighted that you're here with us today. We're also extremely appreciative of your leadership on the Global Commission. And I know you're actually in Milan today for this hybrid event. So I know you have a very busy schedule of events there in Milan. We're very grateful that you've been able to find time to join us. So I now give you the floor. Thank you very much, Minister.
Thank you so much. And it truly is a pleasure to be here, and thank you all also so much for the hard work that you're doing in the IEA, obviously, but also the many ministers and other participants in this commission. I've been talking to and meeting with many of you also bilaterally, and I really am grateful for your engagement. Since March, when this commission convened for the first time, we have focused on how to make the clean energy transition people-centered. How to make sure that we leave nobody behind. Right now, I think it's fair to say that we as a community are in a moment of great urgency, but also one of opportunity. The clean energy transition is an enormous opportunity to create millions of new jobs and a more prosperous future for communities and workers alike. If we are to seize this opportunity, we need to focus strongly on equality, social inclusion, and fairness. 130 years ago in Denmark, Danish wind pioneer Poul had the exact same focus. When he built the first electricity-producing wind turbine in Denmark, maybe even in the world, he did it for social reasons. Poul had seen how new inventions like the steam turbine and other electrical applications started the industrialization, which drew many people from the countryside into the cities. So he wanted to find a way to modernize life in the countryside also, and he knew that electricity was the key to the future. Poul wanted the rural population to benefit from the electricity, to ease the farm labor, efficient, and to provide light for reading and working during the long, dark winter evenings. And they are long and dark in Denmark, I can tell you. The social vision was his motivation. So building a clean energy future today is not just an opportunity to reimagine how we power our society, but how we allocate opportunity. We must recognize that while some challenges are widely shared, local contexts and specific circumstances are extremely important. Let's take gender equality as one example. In many parts of the world, women are far too often disproportionately affected by a lack of energy access or reliance on more polluting forms of energy. In these cases, policymakers and leaders should consider how to directly impact women's health and social and economic well-being, for example, by supporting clean cooking initiatives like the Clean Cooking Alliance. The Girls for Rules initiative provides the skills necessary for jobs in the clean energy economy through local, bottom-up education, training, and empowerment. And in Nepal, a young woman, Ariel, is training rural girls to become future energy leaders in their local community. Across the planet, millions of individuals and local communities are facing challenges brought by the clean energy transition. When we phase out fossil fuels, some sectors will decline, some jobs will disappear, and some companies will need to adapt to survive. It is the harsh reality, and it is a necessary transition. But consider how the clean energy transition can also improve the lives of billions of people all across the planet. Universal energy access, cleaner air, better jobs, and the list goes on. If we are to succeed in achieving our climate goals, we need to put people, all people, at the center of clean energy transitions. It is crucial that nobody's left behind. Working together, I know that we are up for the challenge. Thank you very much.
Minister, thank you very much. And as always, you put things in an excellent historic framework, reminding us that since 130 years ago, renewable energy, clean energy has been a social enterprise, and clean energy transitions are always about people and for people. And sometimes maybe we risk forgetting that when we get into conversations about technology and policy, but really, if it's not about making people's lives better, well, then why are we doing it? And I think it's really important to keep that central framing. The examples you give illustrate that really well. So thank you very much for joining us. And again, thank you for your leadership in this area on the Global Commission. I know you have a lot of very important meetings in Milan today, so you won't be able to stay with us, but we really appreciate you taking the time to join us. Thank you very much, Minister. Let's turn now to another esteemed member of the Global Commission on People-Centered Clean Energy Transitions, Jamshid Godrej. Mr. Godrej is the chairperson of the Council on Energy, Environment and Water of India, with whom we're very pleased to be collaborating on today's event. And of course, he's also the chairman and managing director of Godrej and Boyce. He's well known for his leading thinking in this area, and we're very pleased, Jamshid, that you're with us on the Commission, and we're very pleased that you're with us here today. So the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Your Excellency, Mr. Jorgensen, Excellencies, dear fellow Commission members and friends from around the world. Good evening and greetings from the Council on Energy, Environment and Water. I'm very pleased to be a part of today's program, co-organized by the Council and the IEA Global Commission on People-Centered Clean Energy Transitions. When we discuss clean energy transitions, we usually dive deep into policy and regulatory systems, capacities and infrastructure, markets and trade, investments and technologies, and sometimes we discuss how to build capacity. Rarely do we talk about the people at the heart of this transition, especially those impacted for the worse by this change. We assume that since the cause of cleaner energy is noble, everyone must be benefiting. The reality is much more nuanced. We must approach clean energy transitions from both directions, building the sectors, but in parallel creating a virtuous cycle through socio-economic development to further facilitate the transitions. The challenge is immense. About 760 million people around the world still lack electricity access. Many millions have connections, but at best only a few hours of unreliable power, often delivered at odd hours of the day and night. We also need to provide 2.6 billion people access to clean cooking fuels by 2030. But as the world stepped into 2020, starting the decade of action for sustainable development, the COVID-19 pandemic dealt a body blow. The pandemic has wreaked havoc in most developed nations and devastated the developing ones. Millions have lost their lives and billions have lost their livelihoods. Government priorities have shifted to saving lives and livelihoods. Industries have been pressed into supporting immediate medical and relief infrastructure and activities and rebuilding economies ruined through prolonged lockdowns. It is therefore heartening that several nations, including India, and entities such as the IEA Global Commission have steadfastly stayed on track to address clean energy transitions and climate change. We need to prioritize energy access and eliminate energy poverty in developing countries such as India. We must focus on women and marginalized groups who are often disproportionately affected by a lack of energy access or are distressed and displaced by rapid and aggressive changes to their localities and communities. As a rapidly developing but energy-starved nation, India has made notable gain in bringing energy access, security, justice, and sustainability to its 1.3 billion citizens. India is also showing sensitivity towards the inclusion of women, rural communities, and marginalized populations into its economic and energy transitions pathway. These transitions are happening at three levels: through political will and reform in governance systems, proactive participation by citizens and civil society, and voluntary commitments from industry across all sectors. I will illustrate with three examples from the many. A major national mission, the Prime Minister's Ujjwala Yojana, which broadly translates into Brightness Scheme, has provided over 80 million deposit-free LPG connections to poor households through their primary women members between 2016 and 2019. This has brought relief to these women and their families from the pollution and health impacts of burning firewood or dung cakes for cooking. It has also alleviated their drudgery of collecting biomass and the hours spent tending to smoky stoves. In August 2021, the scheme was extended to another 10 million poor households. This addition also allows self-certification for address proofs to help migrants who leave their native places for jobs or those displaced by the pandemic. To ensure continued use of costly LPG despite the availability of free biomass, the government is doing extensive hand-holding through community leaders. It has instituted LPG panchayats or forums in villages across India as peer learning platforms. Its Ujjwala Didi initiative is a workforce of 10,000 grassroots educators labeled Didis, elder sisters, as a sign of respect, who engage freely with the women, facilitate refills, answer questions, and help resolve grievances. The Ujjwala scheme is a good example of a people-centered policy that is sensitive to the needs of citizens and can adapt to unexpected situations. Coming to the civil society in 2020, the Council on Energy, Environment, and Water instituted the $3 million Powering Livelihoods initiative to boost India's rural economy by promoting distributed clean energy powered livelihood appliances. Powering Livelihoods is helping startup enterprises with large-scale commercial deployments of appliances such as solar refrigerators, food processors, looms, and weaving machines, and fodder growing stations. It aims to have at least 10,000 beneficiaries, with at least 37.5% women as owners, employees, or associated workers. The larger objective is to provide proof of concept that India's rural population, especially women, can shift from the margins into India's economic mainstream without being displaced from their native locations or migrating to urban hubs. It is also demonstrating future-friendly ways to create self-reliance and economic independence through entrepreneurship in the clean energy area. The private sector is going beyond creating access to clean energy through generation and distribution to helping enhance energy efficiency and reduce emissions from industrial processes and products. My organization, Godrej & Boyce, which was founded in 1897 and today has many diverse businesses, has been strongly committed to sustainability and social inclusion across all operations. One key area has been to substantially improve the energy efficiency of consumer goods, such as refrigerators, cooking appliances, and air conditioners, to reduce running expenditure and simplify household tasks. We are also developing innovative financing schemes with banks and retailers to improve the affordability of these appliances. This is allowing more middle-income and rural families to adopt these appliances without impacting their budgets. This is freeing up the time and energy of women who are traditionally tasked with household chores, allowing them to pursue education and employment opportunities and for self-care and leisure. I will now return to the big picture. India today is on track to achieve its Paris Agreement commitments and stay within the 2 degrees centigrade trajectory. It has already achieved 39% electricity from non-fossil sources against the target of 40% by 2030. It has reduced its emission intensity of its GDP by 24% over the 2005 levels and against the target of 33 to 35% by 2030. India has also recently crossed the milestone of 150 gigawatts of renewable energy capacity from solar, wind, biomass, small and large hydropower, and has committed to 450 gigawatts of renewables by 2030. Moreover, despite the economic setback due to the COVID-19 pandemic, India is expected to regain its position as the fastest growing major economy in 2022. However, we must note that India's per capita energy consumption is only about 1,200 units per annum versus the global average of 3,200 units per annum. This is of course rising with national mission to provide 24/7 power to all households and villages and electrification of industry and transportation. So while the government is aggressively driving clean energy transition, even the massive 450 gigawatt capacity will be supplemented. Coal and fossil-based energy will be integral to the energy mix in the coming decades. Coal India, the largest India state-owned corporation, has a workforce of about 275,000 people, and millions of families depend on these workers and the operations. Utility-scale renewables already employ 100,000 people, and the 450 gigawatt target is expected to create hundreds of thousands more jobs. But the geographical and skill distribution of these two energy-related workforces vary very widely and are not easily substitutable. Also, issues such as political economy, energy security, land rights, coal's cross-subsidization of railways, the most affordable long-distance travel options most Indians have, further complicate the transition away from coal. These issues cannot be alleviated by merely increasing clean energy capacity or skilling workers in green jobs. Supporting communities that are deeply vulnerable to the clean energy transition would be crucial to achieving a just, equitable, and inclusive transition. It is also important to keep in mind that the clean energy transition cannot happen in isolation. We must pay equal attention to issues such as increasing climate risks and depleting resources such as water and food that threaten the security of citizens and consequently of nations. We must consider the overall impact of such changes on people, their communities, on industry, and the governance frameworks, and find a broader basket of solutions drawing from the foundations of sustainable economic development. We must also accept that each country will chart its own developmental journey, powered by clean energy and rooted in the well-being of its people. The IEA Global Commission has taken a major initiative to bring attention to the people-centered clean energy transition by convening political leaders from several countries, the United Nations, the European Commission, as well as several influential social and sectoral experts from industry and civil society. I also appreciate the Commission's efforts to engage with the youth, to empower them with the skills and the tools and the seats at the right table to transform their passion and ambition for a sustainable future into the real challenge for good. This cohesion is thought must be converted into commitments to action through sincere partnerships, especially with the Global South. I want to thank the Commission for their efforts and for co-organizing this webinar with the Council, and we will continue to support the Commission's work. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you, Jamshid. Thank you very much indeed. And we're delighted, I must say, to be collaborating with the Council and, of course, with you personally, both today and in the context of the Global Commission. And your address has really reminded us of the connections between the big picture issues, the global imperative towards clean energy and decarbonisation, and the on-the-ground work that is really so essential to making that people-centred and inclusive. You mentioned Untitled in India, and of course your own work in Godrej and Boyce, and the many dimensions that are really entirely necessary and central to the definition of people-centred clean energy transitions. And of course, this is the focus of the work of the Global Commission, in which context we're talking today. And I should inform those that are not familiar with this work that the Global Commission on People-Centred Clean Energy Transitions was convened earlier this year by the Executive Director of the Iaea, working with the leadership of Denmark and under the chairmanship of the Danish Minister from whom we just heard, and with many esteemed members, including Mr. Godrej, many energy and climate ministers from around the world, and representatives of youth, civil society, labour, and other dimensions. And in just a few short weeks, the Commission will be publishing their recommendations, which are a set of actionable recommendations aimed at governments, leaders, thinkers, and decision makers who want to ensure that their clean energy transition policies and actions are truly people-centred and inclusive. And today we're talking about one key dimension of that, of course, which is gender equity and social inclusion. And we now move to a really esteemed panel of speakers from various parts of the world that are going to help us illuminate these issues and discuss with us some great experience that has been taking place around the world, helping inform the deliberation of our Commission members and, of course, the work of the Iaea, and, of course, probably most crucially, the upcoming COP meeting. So we're meeting today in the framework, albeit online, of the pre-COP meeting that's taking place right now in Milan in Italy. And all of this discussion and certainly the recommendations of the Global Commission will be feeding into COP26 itself, which takes place in exactly 1 month's time. So let's bring our panel on board now, so we can start a discussion with them all. Let me just introduce them by name alphabetically, and then I will open a discussion to bring them all in. And I really want to thank them most sincerely for joining us. I would mention that if you're watching us online and you'd like to pitch into the discussion, you can find me on Twitter, and you're very welcome to ask any questions to the panel, which I'll be happy to put to them. So our excellent panelists today are in alphabetical order. Ms. Seema Arora, who's the Deputy Director General of the Confederation of Indian Industry, head of the CII ITC Centre of Excellence for Sustainable Development, the CII Foundation, and the Indian Women Network. We also have Ms. Sadiksha Arial, who's the co-founder of the Himalayan Innovations, leader of Girls for Rurals, and founding member of the Rural Development Initiative. I'm also very pleased to say we have Dr. Aranaba Ghosh, who's the CEO of the Council on Energy, Environment and Water, that we're delighted to be collaborating with here today. We also have Ms. Rosalina Lindo, a good friend of the Iaea and of this work more generally, the Deputy Secretary of Energy in Panama. We're also joined by Ms. Portomelo Malete, who's the Social Development Policy Coordinator at the Congress of South African Trade Unions, COSATU. And finally, last but not least, Ms. Vaishali Nigam Sheena, who's the chair of the Renew Foundation, Chief Sustainability Officer of Renew Power, and the chairperson of the South Asia Women in Energy Network. So, ladies and gentlemen, you're all very welcome, and I really do thank you all for joining us today. We're going to have a free-flowing discussion with plenty of time, so I hope we can hear from all of you on these really important questions. I know all of the people watching today would like to tap into your wisdom and your experience, so we really do want to hear from you about the actions and the on-the-ground tasks that are necessary to make sure that clean energy transitions are inclusive, that keep a focus on gender equity, that keep a focus on marginalised communities, and bring benefits to all people. So maybe Sadiksha Arial, if it's okay, I'm going to start with you. Thank you very much for joining us. And I thought I'd start by asking you to tell us a little bit about your work in Himalayan Innovations and in Girls for Rurals, which I know your work is very focused on bringing mechanization and economic and social development to rural communities in Nepal. So I'd be grateful if you could tell us a little bit about your work, please.
First of all, I am very thankful to the organizers for having me here. And I am equally grateful to be speaking about, to be given the opportunity to speak about my work in my my country, Nepal. The Girls for Rurals, I started Girls for Rurals because of the very fact that change can be brought by young girls, and it is possible. And the mechanization in the sector, specifically joining the energy with the agriculture, was very necessary in rural communities. And starting and post the big earthquake, 2015 earthquake in Nepal, I was doing research, and I could easily figure out the lack of mechanization in rural communities, the lack of the lack and the effect and the great effect that has it has in the life of the woman. And I was thinking about how to enable these women, by the young leaders of tomorrow. And that was how I configured about Girls for Rurals. And I also have these all of these experiences was driven by the community centered design, the people centered design in our projects. The Girls for Rurals was designed based on human-centered design thinking, and how can we enable one generation with the help of the young generation. And we started with the trainings to the young girls, the general calls for the youth who are there, and I was lucky to have been helped with found the exemplary team who want to work for the energy sector in the rural area. And those girls, most of the girls in my team, the Girls for Rurals, are those girls who wanted to do something, but there was a situation where the rural girls, I want to explain the scenario of such girls. They want to do something, but the hindrance is the policies. How can a young girl can tap into policies to contribute to the rural community through mechanization? That was the biggest problem. And we started Girls for Rurals by coordinating with the local agency first, and then doing the need mapping and the community centered analysis of the energy sector in the very core area we wanted to work in. That was the base of how we were able to design our projects based on mechanization for the community.
Thank you very much, Sadiksha. It's very inspiring what you're doing, and we will definitely come back to some of those themes. But I'm going to jump now to Rosalena, if I may. Rosalena, thank you for joining us. And I'm just listening to Sadiksha as an example of somebody who cares about these issues and has really got activated. And of course, Panama is a UN global champion for the SDGs, and has been thinking about how to engage youth and people like Sadiksha. How do we tap into that energy? How do we support young people who want to make a difference? How do we empower them and involve, but also benefit and learn from them?
So thank you very much, Brian, for the invitation. I'm very pleased to be here, and also with this excellent panel and regarding to this question that is very broad and challenging to answer. But I have to say that for Panama, the formulation and implementation of public policies to accelerate the process of change, it represents a significant challenge for policymakers. And it's also you have to consider a holistic approach, include the technical aspect and the social political condition following and including every single dimension of the impact that these initiatives, that these policies are going to have to citizens' life. In Panama, we understood that challenge, and for us, the energy transition is really centered in our people. For that reason, we developed the Panamanian Energy Transition Agenda and begin its construction in the 2019 before the pandemic through an active dialogue process with the private sector, the public sector, supported by UNDP, but also including youth since the beginning, using as a cornerstone the drivers, the SDGs, and for these concepts, digitalization, decarbonization, democratization, and decentralization. And during the hardest part of the pandemic in Panama in November from last year, the National Cabinet finally approved the National Energy Transition Guidance, and it was established a National Energy Transition Council to serve as an advisory committee, as a consultation and accountability space between 9 governmental institutions and 8 representatives from the private sector and academia. And I have to say that the decision to include those members of the Energy Transition Council take into consideration that balance. We have to have women there, we have to have youth there, professional energy youth representing the different sectors, and also seniors are involved. And furthermore, in December 2020, Panama included in this agenda as a fundamental part of our NDC's commitments to mitigate climate change, increasing our NDC ambition, that really represent the 95% of our emission reductions that come from the energy transition agenda and involve youth representative. The low emission pathway have to be in the short term a way to develop economic recovery and to clear the opportunity to accelerate the creation of jobs and improve the quality of life of our population, to assure access to clean, modern, and sustainable energy solution for us was fundamental to share an inclusive and fair vision permeating in every change process produced by the transition, where gender equity allow us to maximize the benefits of social cohesion in favor of local sustainability. And I have to recognize that we are building a Women and Energy Nexus roadmap, seeking to ensure that women participate not only in the consultation and planning processes, but also in the construction, in the operation, in the maintenance of this new scheme associated with the energy users. The energy transition agenda have to be also carried out locally, and we are enabling conditions for women to participate, leading and supporting the identification of off-grid renewable energy solutions, and also to use less polluting energy technologies for cooking. But as we have diverse women fighters active in the protection of our environment, and also active entrepreneurs generating opportunities for the common well-being, we are taking this diversity, these different actors and needs in mind for build the energy and women nexus roadmap, and focusing mainly in these few things. We have to improve the availability and quantity of data that gender indicators for our energy sector, focusing in climate mitigation, industry and research and development. We are structuring the systematic collection of this data gender in order to be able to really monitor how is performing the energy transition, how is performing our inclusiveness of the energy transition. We have been re-identifying relevant actors, constructing our common goals for develop opportunity for women. But also I have to say that in the 8 energy transition agenda strategies, the gender perspective is included. And while we are performing and analyzing the economic impact of the energy transition, we evaluate also how will impact small, medium, and large enterprises, how is impact gender issues within these small, medium, and large enterprises, and how the energy transition will provide combos for accelerating the accessible and the opportunities to improve the quality of life of those people that are running those companies, that are starting new and innovative ways of business. And taking that into consideration, we are actually accounting how many teachers and professors we do need to develop energy transition professionals on time. What and how we have to communicate the opportunities of the energy transition to appeal the interests of general population. And for us, the goal is to make the energy transition available, approachable, and interesting, including the people who, including even the people who is selling ice cream informally in the street, that also they need energy efficiency freezers in order to keep their products. We are going forward up to that level in order to include everybody in.
Thank you very much, Rosalena. And I heartily applaud the inclusion of ice cream in our discussion. I think that's well worth focusing on. And the breadth of your vision is really inspiring. So thank you very much. And we'll certainly come back to you shortly. But I'd like to turn now, if I may, to Bartolomeo Malete from COSATU. Bartolomeo, thank you for joining us. And we've heard from several speakers about that of course, clean energy transitions really center on the question of jobs. How do we maximize the creation of new, decent jobs for everybody? But also, how do we recognize that some people are going to lose their jobs, communities are going to suffer? And of course, this is a very lively and important debate in South Africa right now. So I'd really love to hear from you about what you've learned so far about engaging in the form of social dialogue or engaging between labor and government and other stakeholders, how to work together to try to do this right, to maximize the benefits for everybody.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
Sorry, Bartolomeo, I think you might be on mute there. Do you mind unmuting yourself?
Oh, sorry about that.
Thank you, thank you.
So I'm Bartolomeo Malete. I come from COSATU, which is the Congress of South African Trade Unions. We are one of the biggest federations, labor federations in the country. We have affiliates that organize in various sectors. So we as COSATU, I think one of the things that we've been fortunate to have is that we are at spaces and tables where social dialogue is big and is being one of the things that are actually encouraged from our side. So we sit on various as stakeholders on various committees. We sit on my colleague, who I co-lead the Just Transition and Climate Change projects on. Ms. Lebogang Molai sits on the Presidential Climate Change Commission. We also have engagements at NetLife, where we have both business, government, as well as labor and community engaging in issues that are generally affecting workers and people of South Africa across the board. So when we speak of creation of jobs and we speak of protecting jobs of workers, especially in the just transition. And I'd like to think that because we're such a coal-intensive country, we speak of jobs, especially in the mining sector, where you see that the transition, it's imminent. The transition is happening in the coal mining sector. And it's important that we consider all of those jobs that are going to be lost. So in engaging communities and engaging workers, we're trying to find a space where we put in the factor of the environment, but we also put in the factor that these are livelihoods of workers, and to sustain and maintain the livelihoods of workers and the sustainability of their actual engagement in society and as people as a whole, their comprehensive social security. We need to really focus on how it is we're going to make sure that these workers are not left to destitute because we're decommissioning mines, are not left to destitute because we are moving out of the mining town because a certain mine is closing down due to the fact that there's decommissioning. So in speaking and engaging with communities, I think communities, workers, business, as well as government, there's been a broad general understanding that the most basic thing and the most important thing is to ensure that we are not moving ahead of ourselves in relation to the just transition and forgetting that this is a transition not only about business, not only about mining, not only about the government, but these are actual people's lives. People's livelihoods will be lost. People's education of children would be disrupted, because moving away from that a mining town would actually mean that the children would be affected. There are other health issues that are related to the just transition that we need to think of, because these are communities that have been historically in these societies that are so coal intensive. So there are various elements in which we need to think of when we speak of the just transition, and also ensure that with that decommissioning of mines, with the job losses that will take place, when introducing renewable energy, how do we incorporate these workers that are losing their livelihoods into it? How do we reskill? I think the reskilling and the retraining of workers is quite an important discussion, and it's a discussion that's been taking place across the board. So as COSATU, we're always advocating for the maintenance, the sustainability of jobs. We have aligned ourselves with the climate, 1 million climate change job project. So we are centered around ensuring that our members are not left with our jobs and are not left in a situation where they are unable to actually participate in the economy and have meaningful work.
Thank you very much, Bartomelo. And you said that you made the point about recognition that the transition is imminent. As you engage with communities, particularly those who are maybe feeling the negative impacts, do you find that is generally accepted, or are there many voices effectively saying, no, we don't need to change?
Communities are very apprehensive when it comes to this. And I think the one good thing that we've been able to do is actually encourage education. We have various civil society organizations that we've aligned with, and we are trying to get into communities not only as a top-down approach, but a bottom-up approach, where we have this education, this discussion, where we actually discuss how it is this will negatively affect us. And as much as communities would be apprehensive and would want to protect what they feel is most known to them, we still need to consider the environmental effects. We still need to consider other issues that the community needs to be taught on. So the communities across the board, communities in Mpumalanga, which is a very coal-intensive province, are open to discussions. But I think the main thing we need to focus on is not going there and wanting to impose our positions to them. We need to have an engagement in which we understand, and communities are open to those understandings. And I think if we are sensible and we are honest in how we approach communities, then the discussion then becomes free-flowing.
Thank you very much, Bartomelo. Let me turn now to Dr. Aranaba Ghosh. Aranaba, first of all, thank you. You're the Chief Executive Officer of the Council on Energy, Environment and Water, and we're very pleased to be working with you. Thank you to you and all of your team for today and for the ongoing engagement. And of course, many of our people watching us online will know you and know your name because you're a leading thinker in this in many ways. And it's great then to be able to ask you, reflecting on what you've heard so far about the multi-dimensions we're dealing with here. And of course, India is dealing with this directly in terms of, as Mr. Godrej says, there's still a need for more energy access. There's still a need for the people of India to be able to use more energy to improve their lives, to bring social and economic and well-being benefits. And we have to square that with the very urgent and pressing challenges around climate change and clean energy. So what are your thoughts on the alignment of those? Is it possible to align so many imperatives at the same time?
Brian, first of all, many thanks for having me on this. And of course, it's always great to collaborate with the Iaea. We've had a long-running relationship and we hope to keep it going. Today's panel, and I'm particularly privileged to be in the company of so many great leaders in energy. Today's panel really is upturning the way we tend to think about energy transition. We tend to think about energy transition as a bunch of analysts sitting on the top with a political leader sending a top-down signal and the country transforms. I think when we start looking at it in a bottom-up way, we begin to see a very different story. And the word you use, Brian, multidimensional, is at the core of it. About 7-8 years ago at CEW, we started thinking about, what would multidimensional energy access look like? And we realized that even after a household is connected to a clean cooking gas cylinder or to an electricity wire, that doesn't mean the energy access story is over. Because once you get one light bulb, you want 10. Once you get one fan, you want three. Once you get three fans, you want a refrigerator. So energy access is a evolving story. And the multidimensionality is that along with the connection has to come the issue of the quality of supply, the reliability, the affordability, and so forth. And of course, the health dimensions associated with it. And this is where the focus then becomes about the household, about the people, rather than about the infrastructure alone. Now, all this was happening at the same time as India was thinking about a leapfrog towards renewables. 11 years ago, we had less than 20 megawatts of solar. In 2015, when we signed the SDGs, we had the unenviable title of having the largest number of people in the world without access to electricity or clean cooking energy. Now, I would say that both of those imperatives have been not completely overcome, but we've certainly come a very long way. India, as Mr. Godrej mentioned, has now crossed 100,000 megawatts of solar and wind and biomass, more than 147,000 megawatts, including large hydro. You'll hear more about that from Vaishali, as her company is leading the charge in a way in this. But at the same time, we managed to electrify every village. We managed to bring a wire to nearly 100% of the households. And we managed to get clean cooking energy to more than 80%. Where are the conflicts then from a household perspective? Because what India is trying to demonstrate is a double leapfrog. And if an emerging economy or a developing economy can demonstrate that double leapfrog, it then begins to serve as a sort of beacon for many others to say, I could do the same. But where are the conflicts? The conflicts arise in the ability of households to pay. So we have to now raise the bar. It's no longer sufficient to just connect a household. You have to look at a household's ability to pay, whether it's for clean cooking energy or for electricity. Beyond the ability to pay, you have to think about a household's modality to pay. Is a household in a rural area always able to pay every month? Or should we look at it along the cropping cycle, around the seasonal cycles of payments? Should we be prepaid or postpaid? We have to also look at the decision-making authority within the household. And this is absolutely critical when you apply a gender lens. If the woman of the household is not taking the decisions with regards to where the household expenditure goes, then perhaps she's then unfortunately having to continue using solid biofuels while an unfilled LPG cylinder also sits in the kitchen. You change the decision matrix, that same woman might also suddenly become a household-based entrepreneur, where she starts using productive, distributed clean energy for productive purposes. Again, as we've estimated, there's a more than $50 billion opportunity in that area. One final dimension, which also puts people at the center, is what we could call community power, whether it's for schools or primary health centers. Today, when we are thinking about storage of vaccines, we have to think not just about who's manufacturing the vaccines or who's transporting the vaccines, but does the vaccine have the ability to stay or have that kind of shelf life in a far distant village? And again, the role of distributed energy. One state alone, Chhattisgarh, one of our poorest states, has solarized all the primary health centers. Less than $100 million in India can solarize every single primary health center in the country. So once we start looking at this story from a bottom-up dimension, from a multidimensional aspect, through a gender lens, we see that this double leapfrog that India has already attempted and is unfolding then begins to demonstrate that there is a strong equity basis at its core. And if we can keep that at our core, then the next decade can actually open up an even more set of opportunities at the household, at the community, and at the productive use of energy levels.
Thank you very much, Arnab. And you painted a very vivid, very approachable picture of the household level, and you rightly kept it centered on people and how they can act and how they can benefit from these things. And you rightly emphasized the bottom-up thinking here, but at the same time, we're talking in the context of COP in a month, which is talking about global imperatives, global climate change, national targets, big gigaton numbers that are hard to relate to. Is there a risk of disconnect between that kind of top-down thinking and the bottom-up framing that you're bringing today?
Well, very quickly, Brian, of course, there's always a risk because on one hand, we could say that the immediacy of the energy access challenge requires that coal power supplies the next household. But I think it's important for our listeners to recognize that, say, over the next decade, the amount of the kind of capacity for renewables that India intends to build out with 450,000 megawatts by 2030, essentially means we are building on more renewables than the entire electricity system of India today. Now, no country on the planet has built out renewables, completely overturned its electricity mix. That doesn't mean that the generation mix changes overnight, but essentially you're saying, I have got this and I'm going to throw this away and I'm going to replace it with something else. And it's very important to recognize that even from that top-down level, there is that very clear direction of travel. And one more final thing, of course, is the use of energy in industry. And I think the recently announced green hydrogen mission of India is a game changer, where we are aiming to bring down the cost of 1 kilogram of green hydrogen within 1 decade to less than $1. This 111 mantra that we're trying to pursue can then transform not just the power generation story, but also the industrial, especially the heavy industrial energy story. And once that happens, I think you'll have a snowball effect. And I think the pace at which coal, which is already sort of plateauing, at least in the electricity generation sector, begins to taper off very rapidly.
Thank you very much, Arnab. Let me turn now to Vaishali Nigam-Sinha, who, as I said, is the chair of the Renew Foundation, the Chief Sustainability Officer of Renew Power, and also the chairperson of South Asia Women in Energy. So, Vaishali, thank you very much for joining us, and thanks for your patience. I'd like to start, first of all, by maybe asking you to tell us a little bit about the work of the South Asia Women in Energy, please.
Yes, sure. Thanks a lot, Brian. It's a pleasure to be here. I'd like to congratulate both Iaea and CW for including this topic, a very important one in the global energy transition, which I guess needs a lot more attention than it's getting. So thank you for doing that. And it's really a pleasure to be with people who I feel are doing really great work in this sector. And, you know, we just need so many more institutions like this to contribute. So let me talk a little bit about SAVI, and I'd like to say that, you know, in addition to SAVI, each one of us sitting here, you know, Iaea, CW, CII, all of us are contributing to really significant effort with respect to engaging women and finding solutions to a lot of the problems related to not only climate, but in energy in particular, as to how can we get women engaged. So SAVI is basically a partnership. It's a platform which has been formed as a result of a partnership between USISPF and a couple of other organizations to basically identify ways in which you know, women can get a much needed platform. Particularly, I guess, in Asia, but we've seen that we have a lot of interest from other parts of the world to address issues being faced by women in South Asia. So the idea and the goal is to, you know, bridge the sharp gender gap between, you know, which we have seen in the energy sector by looking at some of the structural barriers which inhibit women from being at the heart of the sector. We all know women are actually at the receiving end as far as, you know, the negative impact, you know, related to, you know, climate change is concerned. So how do we engage more women to ensure that they, you know, they contribute and are well equipped to, with skills, competencies, etc., to be able to, you know, get engaged and also, I guess, you know, increase their knowledge, increase their skills, to be effective and tap on the numerous opportunities. I mean, the world is changing when you look at, you know, the global sort of energy transition, which is taking place. In India, the transition is pretty significant. And as Arunabha pointed out, and as Mr. Godrej pointed out earlier, that the sort of the canvas is huge. The sad part of the story is that women are not getting engaged as much as they want to. So SAVI is, kind of bringing women together and providing some capacity building opportunities, mentoring opportunities, sponsorship opportunities, and engaging with corporates such as ours and other institutions to be able to, get women more engaged in this sector and, on various fronts, on capacity building, funding, addressing issues around energy access, and of course, one area which we all feel women can really benefit significantly is from the learnings, not only within the countries, but, like an inter-country sort of learning exercise. So SAVI is trying to get that rolling, whether it is in the global south, but also between the global north and global south. So these are some of the activities which are being undertaken. We do it through, as I said, mentorship, and we also have some workshops. We have newsletters for more knowledge dissemination. We have a portal where we list opportunities for women to get employment in areas where there are opportunities for them to work in the energy space. As we all know, there's a huge myth that it's more challenging to work in the energy sector for women because it's an infra type of a sector, which actually is not true, because being in this sector, as a company, as Arunabha was mentioning, we've been in the sector for 10 years. And when I work in this sector, I do feel that there's so many opportunities for women, and there's a huge myth that it's very challenging for women to work in this sector. As corporates, as we see corporates contributing to the whole area of making organizations more women-friendly, more secure and safe for women to operate in, it's a fundamental sort of an exercise organizations are undertaking. And so therefore, to make sites safe is a part of that journey. And so it's just natural for women to feel comfortable when they work in organizations such as ours, where you have hostels and safety and security. And so there are a lot of opportunities there. But even besides that, if we look at fundamental areas like research and development, innovation, finance, branding, communications, there's a huge amount of opportunity. So we are trying to put this in the front and providing, amplifying these opportunities, making it and showcasing role models, women who are successful in this sector, so that it inspires the younger generation of women to look up to them and hopefully get inspired to come and work in the sector. And let me tell you, even if you're doing a very sort of non-energy role in in a company like ours, even if you're working, let's say, I don't know, in another function, which is not necessarily infra related, but I'm just trying to think, like even HR, etc. You feel the sort of the relevance of your getting more engaged, and so you inspire, hopefully, through the effect to engage more women. So I think these are the activities which SAVI is trying to do by engaging corporates, by engaging NGOs, international organizations, partners, to be able to advocate for greater engagement for women in this sector. Let me give you a small example, Brian, of the work we are doing even at Renew. We are partnering with UNDP to ensure that, and we're running a women's accelerator program. We've partnered with an academic institution to engage young women, to engage entrepreneurs, to find solutions in the energy sector. Given the amount of opportunity that, as Arunabha mentioned, hydrogen, storage, etc., there's a huge amount of opportunity for digitalization, for modeling, and various other areas where there are entrepreneurial opportunities. We are recognizing these women, we are supporting them, helping them train, skill, networking is so important for women. So these platforms like SAVI and many others provide women that platform. So I'll pass it back to you, Brian.
Thank you very much, Vaishali, and thank you. You've really illustrated some of the very commendable actions taken by networks like Savvy, but also by, of course, companies like Renew. I suppose my question to you then is, what actions should governments be taking to help improve gender balance in employment in energy? Are there specific actions you would think government should take?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think the first action I would like governments to take is to see more women in the government, in decision-making positions, and perhaps even in the ministries, where they can perhaps have mandatory, recruitment guidelines for organizations to engage more women, and I'm not only talking about corporates, etc. That's not what I'm talking about, but even just making sure that there are more women. When you look at like the remotest parts of our country, in the grassroots level, in the panchayats here in our country, we need more women to be represented, and then sensitization of these women leaders to ensure that they are pushing and advocating for women. So when I work, for example, at Renew, when you have women in leadership positions, they tend to advocate for women. They tend to be more sensitized. So perhaps the government should ensure that there are ways in which women can get, women are better represented in leadership positions. And I think that's a very, very important part of the story. And a little bit of advocacy around the opportunities, I think, present for women to get engaged. I think that will motivate women to come forward and get engaged. So whether, again, as I say, in the rural areas, there's huge amounts of opportunities for women to get engaged in the supply chain on various issues like cooking and replacing sort of the harmful ways of sort of cooking in India, which we see, and replacing with greener ways of doing that. So I guess policy to push engagement, to push campaigns where women get sensitized towards the opportunities there are in the sector, and also define a little bit better as to how they can contribute, and also in skilling. So that's another area. So we have Skill Development Council, for example. Make energy an important vertical. I'm sure there is a vertical, but make it easier for women to leverage that, right? So a lot of the issues, say, women in rural India faces, and we discussed it today, Seema and I were talking on another panel, is connectivity. And how can we make sure women have handsets where they can engage with each other, leverage these skilling programs, training programs at the grassroots level, so that, they get, they're more educated and they get engaged, because that area is pretty significant. We run a program at Renew called Lighting Lives, where we are running a digital program where we use schools as a ground for training. We use solar panels to light schools, at least with 3 or 4 hours of electricity, where there is no electricity, or less than 2-3 hours of electricity. But after the school hours, we get women from the community for self-help group type of activities, where they are educated on various opportunities in the sector. But this is being done at a very small scale. Can we scale it up? Perhaps we could, and we should. So digital, I guess, access to Wi-Fi, which is our life, I guess, connectivity and capacity building and sensitization by the government, perhaps, and also more leadership would definitely be critical in advancing the case for women in energy. Yeah.
Thanks very much, Vaishali. And let me turn now to Seema, who you just mentioned, Seema Arora, the Deputy Director General of the Confederation of Indian Industry. Seema, thank you for joining us, and thank you also for your patience in waiting until I could bring you in. And I'm very keen to hear your perspective, because, of course, you represent a really huge network of very important industrial players. And there are many dimensions here that we've discussed about, and India's leadership in so many ways. And we've also touched on the concept of social dialogue. So I'd be interested in your views, whether it's a question of gender, social inclusion more widely. How can industry show leadership in fostering that dialogue for better outcomes here?
Good evening. Thank you, Brian. And it's a pleasure to be a part of this conversation along with all these very eminent panelists. CII, as you mentioned already, is a very large industry body. And I'm pleased to be on the panel with two of our very distinguished members, Mr. Jamshed Godrej, who is the past president of CII, also chairs the CII Climate Change Council, and of course, Vaishali, who leads our Indian Women Network. She's the chairperson, I'm the secretariat. So as you can see, we have multiple members who are actually engaged in showing and being the role models of what can be done. I think as I speak, and Arunabha also mentioned, in India, the energy transition is taking, I would say, strong roots. I can see a lot of our members seeing the risks and the opportunity of this transition and then making their plans. We are, as we speak in CII, seeing a lot of our members understanding the risks, opportunities. And when an industry actually, let's say, takes on a target or takes on a journey of energy transition, it's not only the company itself, right? It's all the touch points. It's every touch point that the industry has across the value chain, be it, their suppliers, the upstream, the downstream. It also touches the community because the industry also is in some way, if it is, of course, a consumer facing industry, is in some ways, talking to the consumer and educating the consumer. So I think the whole, industry, when it's doing this thing, is actually making a huge contribution to the energy transition by even engaging every part of the value chain and the community itself. And I think they do it in several ways, and we also work with them. Of course, one is, of course, capacity building. Vaishali mentioned this, so a lot of capacity buildings for suppliers, etc., to make the energy transition. Also, educating the consumer on the value of making the right choices, right? And if you are a B2B company, then also in your, if you can actually make the supplier and ask the supplier to be more, energy efficient. And that's happening. All the PAT schemes and everything has made that happen. Skilling is a major part of it. And I think that's also what industry is now taking up and is helping to see that how they can skill more people. Because if we are talking of the transition, and, this is not a incremental change that we are going to look at. Anurabha talked of the double leapfrog, etc. So it's a transformational change. Skilling and making sure that the various, again, parts of the value chain, even the informal sector, the MSME, need to be skilled. New business models for them have to be developed. And I see my members and CII industry members getting engaged in this. Of course, a lot more needs to be done. And that's where CII as a, as an ecosystem player, as a convening platform, works with the industry, but also closely with the government to make sure that, how do we make these islands of excellence where we see role models actually become scalable practices, which is when the large-scale economy-wide transition will actually happen. So this is the role that CII plays, and we are trying to make sure that we don't leave anyone behind in this. And the MSME sector was talked about by some other panelists, and this is very important. And we have programs through our large companies which help the MSME sector understand the challenges, make the change. And also there are, I would say, financial incentives and mentoring being provided by the large companies for the MSME sector too. Especially in the automobile sector, we are seeing this in a very large way. I also want to bring in a little different perspective from the grassroots. This is because I also work as the CEO of the CII Foundation. CII Foundation is a charitable organization. Mr. Godrej is actually the chair of the CII Foundation, which works with community and is actually, looking at it from a community point of view. And because your topic is about, gender and social inclusion, I think we've learned a lot through some of our programs from the community and the community leaders. One such program Vaishali just mentioned, we in CII Foundation run a program called the Women Exemplar Program, where we have identified over the last 16 years, multiple grassroots level women change agents. And from them, we have learned, that what are the challenges that they face. I think while we are, making, I would say solutions available, it's important that we need to co-create the solutions with them, because one size doesn't fit all. What works in one geography doesn't work in another geography. What works for one community doesn't, that's one learning we have. The other thing is that to make any solution and the energy transition successful at the community level, we really have to look at it in a more holistic manner. The social structures also need to change. So when we work with these women, they're extremely disadvantaged. They have had personal struggles and they've come out of it as leaders and then have realized that how they can actually bring change in the community. And energy transition is also a change that we are bringing. So mobilizing community participation using grassroots level leaders, Vaishali also talked about it, Arunabha talked about it, is very important. While we can have policies which say encourage, or which provide free access to these, Ujjwala scheme and the gas that we are talking of, the cylinders, etc. Unless the community realizes that this is very important and they need to, as Anurabha was saying, have the source or rather the money to be able to go back and refill it, and it's important to use it. The cylinder will be used once and then it just lies there. So again, one point that the government needs to do is have women represented in the policy making. That's something that we are lacking. I think we make policies taking women as beneficiaries. They're not just beneficiaries. They can actually give you very good ideas. And if the energy transition has to be successful, women leaders have to come in, and grassroots, mid-level, women for corporate, everywhere, need to come in and be participant in this policy making for any kind of energy transition that we are talking about. We cannot just look at these grassroots women and say, you're just beneficiary, we know what is best for you. They know better and they can actually tell us. So I think these are some of the learnings that we've had from the ground. And for the energy transition to be successful, some of these need to be worked on and have to be also made scalable. Because of course, we are doing, let's say, we are working with, let's say, cohorts of women in different communities, maybe touching 2 million women right now. But many more need to be touched, and they need to be made aware, skilled, and the capacity has to be built. And policies have to then be framed by these women and these communities so that they are successful and they serve the purpose that they are meant for. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Seema. And I think it's very enriching to hear your framing of, a bit like other speakers, when we try to make the connection between these big picture global imperatives that we talk about, and then what it means for people on the ground, particularly marginalized people, particularly for rural women. And it's really inspiring, I must say, to hear the great work you're doing in that regard, as it has been to hear from all of our panelists and friends. I'm sorry we don't have more time to continue this discussion. We could certainly talk for much longer. It's a really great set of discussions we've been having here today. And certainly, speaking personally, it's been very uplifting to hear of the great action, and very informative too, as we in the IEA work with governments around the world to inform them and work with them and advise them on what actions they can take to make their clean energy transitions more people-centered, more inclusive, and of course with a particular focus on gender equity and social inclusion. So let me thank all of our panelists for your participation today. And let me now then move into our last session, where we have two very special guests to give closing remarks to round off our discussion here today. And first of all, we're going to hear from the co-chair of the Global Commission. Et donc maintenant, j'aimerais me tourner, s'il vous plaît, vers la ministre de Mines et de Géologie du Sénégal, Madame Sophie Ladima. Comme j'ai dit, Madame la ministre est la co-présidente de la Commission mondiale sur les impacts socio-économiques de la transition.
She's also the co-chair on the Council on Energy, Environment and Water, and also Minister for Petroleum. So I would like to really thank you for your leadership that we really appreciate. And we also want to thank you to be with us today. So please, you have the floor, Mrs. The Ministry. Thank you very much, dear colleagues, dear ministers, dear dear experts, dear participants. Thank you very much to invite us to share with you and our colleagues our perspectives. First, I would like to congratulate the Dr. Roche in for his approach that is inclusive, equitable, and just. I would like to also felicitate the Commission for its work on the human-centered transition, which allowed countries to share our experiences when it comes to the energy transition, but also all the social and economic aspects. This exchange is extremely important because there is a very big gap between developed countries and developing countries where more than 3 billion people are living. and which have as a main source for cooking fuels such as wood and more gas as well, coming from organic matter. But we all know that those solid fuel liberate gases that are very negative and noxious for health. Dear Minister, distinguished guests, it's very important to correct those gaps while facilitating economic transition in the world. And in Senegal, the economic transition is very important. The state is actually implementing policies to guarantee energy access for all, to limit deforestation, and to reduce also, as well the gases, the noxious gases, and also to create employment and employment opportunities in all the sectors and in the energy sector in particular. So the government has developed several programs, for example, mechanization from 1973, and also the development of gas to develop cooking with gas instead of wood. Also, the German cooperation with the Ministry of Development of our country has implemented a project that is financed by the Green Climate Fund to disseminate improved cooking stoves in houses and also to stimulate employment in local communities. We also have programs that are aligned on the SDGs. And it's a program that has been implemented for 11 years and which is giving very good outcomes and created 12,000 employments and also the sale of 400,000 tons of fertilizer. We've also developed another program of solar lampposts in the street, which is the biggest project of this kind in the world. And this really also stimulated economic activities while guaranteeing security in some areas of the country. And the second phase will be implemented with another 100,000 lampposts of this kind. This will benefit more local communities. So all this to say that we are very interested in this type of project which benefit to women or to vulnerable groups and remote areas. And actually, I'm very happy to speak just about all those panelists that were talking about women to show that we also are working for women in our country. There is also a plan for stimulating employment of women in all levels of government so that women are heard and their voices and they can participate also to the elaboration of policies. We are also drafting a strategy to make sure that women will take part in all sectors and all value chains in the country. And this will be implemented over the next 5 years. We also have another project called Pangaea, which will also improve access to energy by vulnerable groups, including women, and to make sure that they are not left behind. And actually, several studies have shown that a better access to energy in terms of cooking or lighting or productive activities should reduce the pressure on women in terms of time and workload. And this should also have a positive impact on women when it comes to their education, literacy, nutrition, health, and economic opportunities, or their participation to community affairs, which will have positive repercussions in all sectors of society and in families. Ladies and gentlemen, this fight in our countries, we are slim resources, and with our partners, should not be delayed. It is very important to take into account the specificities of all countries in this fight. And I can see that with all the interventions that we heard have illustrated the different approaches of social inclusion and gender equity in our countries. This diversity comes from different realities and different resources, and it's aligned on Article 2 of the Paris Agreement. Because humanity is facing a common problem, which is the fight against climate change. And so we must leverage all our diversity to face those problems and those issues. And so this means that we must support technically and financially all countries, including developing countries that really need resources to finance energy transition in a way that is just, equitable, and inclusive, and for everyone. It's a very important thing for Senegal, and we call all countries to own Article 2 of this Paris Declaration in the preparation of COP26. And since then, I look forward to the next meeting in October that will allow us to submit our recommendations to the works of COP26. I thank you very much, all panelists, all participants, and I thank you very much for your attention. Thank you again, and see you again soon. Goodbye.
Merci beaucoup, Madame Memrise, et je vous remercie encore pour votre leadership. Merci beaucoup.
C'est moi qui vous remercie.
Thank you again for your leadership.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. As we draw to a close, it's my great pleasure to introduce now our final speaker, who is the Deputy Executive Director of the Iaea, Ambassador Mary Warlick, who's a great champion of many of the issues we're speaking about here today. So, Ambassador Warlick, thank you for joining us, and I turn the floor over to you to close our event.
Thank you very much, Brian. And let me say it's a great pleasure to be here. I would like to begin by thanking Minister Gladima for all of the time that she's devoted to the Iaea today. We're very grateful. This is the second event, actually, that the minister has participated, showing her leadership, as Brian just said, both with respect to the clean energy transitions more broadly, but very specifically with respect to the people-centered clean energy transitions and this particular issue regarding gender equity and social inclusion, which is so important. I understand that you've had a very good set of discussions today, and really want to express my appreciation to all the speakers who have participated. These issues, as you well know and have been discussing, are really central to the mission of delivering net zero energy systems. The IEA's net zero roadmap shows how the world can achieve a net zero energy system by 2050, but our tracking shows clearly that the required actions are not yet being taken at a sufficient pace and scale. And in fact, global emissions are rising, far from being on the path required to deliver our shared net zero energy ambitions. These issues are not far away in the future, they're really pressing now. And of course, the current news headlines remind us just how relevant these questions are to people's daily lives. At present, we see many parts of the world experiencing high energy prices with the associated concerns about affordability. And access to affordable energy is essential to people's health, well-being, and comfort, as well as to powering economic and social development of all. And while it's inaccurate to lay the responsibility for current high prices at the door of the clean energy transition, the current situation does serve as a reminder to governments seeking to accelerate clean energy transitions of the critical importance of secure and affordable energy supplies, particularly for the most vulnerable people in our societies. And this is why the work of the Global Commission on People-Centered Energy Transitions really is so important. I want to thank the Prime Minister of Denmark for agreeing to act as honorary patron of the Global Commission. Particular thanks to Minister Jorgensen for his chairing of the Commission, and to Minister Gladima of Senegal as co-chair. Thank you once again for being with us today. The Commission was convened by the Executive Director of the IEA earlier this year, and it brings together energy and climate ministers, as well as representatives of labor, youth, and other key voices. The Global Commission has been discussing exactly the issues that we've heard about today. And as was just referenced, we'll very shortly make actionable recommendations designed to help governments and decision makers ensure that their clean energy policies and actions are truly people-centered and inclusive. I look forward to seeing the recommendations of the Global Commission, which will be launched at an online event on October 26th as an important input into discussions at COP26 and beyond. Clean energy transitions are at heart about people, making their lives better, improving the environment, creating new, well-paid jobs. And these transitions will not succeed if they're not seen as fair and inclusive and truly delivering such benefits. One dimension particularly close to my heart is that of gender, as you've been discussing today. There are many important gender equality aspects to clean energy transitions. These include energy access, which has very important gender dimensions relating to gender roles in clean cooking, for example. Another key issue is employment, where we know that the energy sector is simply not performing well in terms of gender balance. Across the energy sector globally, women hold only 14% of senior management positions. The IEA, working with its members, has been examining gender balance in public bodies in the energy sector. And our survey of 25 IEA members found that gender diversity in senior management of their energy ministries has improved from 5% being gender balanced in 2010 to 30% in 2020. But to further progress in this important area, the IEA has now established a gender advisory council consisting of senior officials from IEA energy ministries. The advisory council will work with us to provide strategic guidance on how to improve the mainstreaming of gender policies, and it will facilitate the exchange of best practice. We are also working closely with international platforms such as C3E International and the Equal by 30 campaign, where we act as the coordinator for the knowledge and data workstream. So allow me to close by thanking all of the speakers once again today, and for all of you for joining us online. Let me assure you that the IEA is ready to work with you all to ensure clean energy transitions not only move at the pace that the challenge requires, but also in ways that prioritize inclusiveness, fairness, and people-centered outcomes. So thank you to all of you once again.